folks, welcome to another edition of Wild, Wicked, and Weird. I am your host, Brett Hedges, along with my co-host.
Hello, I'm Will Voyvodic.
We are just two average guys from Windsor, Ontario, taking a deep dive into the wild, wicked, and weird stories from our hometown and around the world. So thanks for joining us.
That's right. And remember to give us a follow on social media, guys. We're on Facebook. Twitter is at WildWickedW. We have our Gmail at wildwickedandweird@gmail.com. Drop us a like, leave a comment, and please, above all, this is, I cannot stress this enough.
We cannot be
the
more
importance of
important
this.
to get this.
Please leave us a review on Apple. Give us 5 stars. It really helps us climb the charts and get above, I don't know what's the meme this week. What cat video is the top video this week?
Exactly. It just helps us climb the ladder a little bit, helps us on the business side, and
trying to beat Ellen. We're trying to take down that bitch.
Absolutely. It just helps us get our message around the world. And you know what, guys? I've got a fantastic story for you this weekend. But, of course, we hope you guys all enjoyed our episode last week of Triller Fight Night and, of course, Willie's Hacker Man episode. A lot of fun there. So if you haven't listened to that episode, please give that one a listen. And otherwise, buckle up, guys, because I've got myself a doozy of a story. Do you have anything that happened this past week that you want to talk about, buddy?
No. I've just been waiting for this story for quite a while. I don't know if you heard at the end of last episode. I'm like, all right, we're ready for Brett's story. But no, Brett takes his time. This better be like The Godfather. This is like Coppola working for 2 years. Brett gets to take his time, everybody.
That's right.
So let's hear it.
Yeah, even when I was in newspapers, my editors had to wait. So, all right. So, no preamble this week. No bullshit. Willie, let's turn back the clocks to 1966. Pick up sticks. I was hoping you would say that. Let's go back to a simpler time in Windsor. We're going to a specific part of Windsor called Riverside.
Ooh.
Diddle-oo. Riverside is the largest neighborhood in East Windsor. It starts at Paulette Road and stops at Little River Road near Riverside High School. So anything east of that is basically the town of Tecumseh. In 1961, Riverside had about 19,000 residents. All right. So back in the 60s, Riverside had its own town with its own police force, government, etc. Until January 1st, 1966, when Riverside and 4 other communities were annexed into Windsor. And a lot of people were pissed, including members of the Riverside Police Department, whose comfortable jobs were about to get a lot busier. Windsor Police had to absorb 5 previously independent police agencies in 1966, with the number of officers going up from 245 to 377. So think about all these cops that were in line for promotion. Now they're like back in the middle of the pack because they got reshuffled.
Okay.
Things are crazy like that, you know,
Yeah.
because the city of Windsor was getting bigger. They wanted to get their tax base bigger, so they amalgamated the surrounding communities, right?
Okay.
And basically everything but like LaSalle and Tecumseh became independent.
Yeah.
Right?
LaSalle's ungovernable.
That's right.
That's why.
That's right. They're basically the ones that don't have. That's right.
Running water? Is that what you're going to say?
No, I was going to say.
Fuck.
No, I was going to say the Windsor Police is in Amherstburg now, but not in LaSalle, correct?
I don't know.
I think so.
Cops? I don't know nothing. I don't know
nothing about the
cops.
cops. Anyway.
What is a cop? What is a town?
What is a town?
What is a town?
I don't know nothing about towns. I don't know nothing about cops.
How's your mother doing? Fuck your mother. Fuck yourself. Huh?
Okay, so the number one songs in 1966 included a bevy of tunes that are still known today.
Peter, Paul, and Mary?
No, including Nancy Sinatra's These Boots Were Made for Walking.
Oh.
And Percy Sledge's classic hit, When a Man Loves a Woman. So we were listening to this a little earlier. I had you listen to it.
Yeah.
So
I thought Brett was trying to get me in the mood. I'm like, Brett, we have work to do.
That's
Stop.
Right. These Boots Were Made for Walking. And but the song that best fits our story this week, that was number one back in the mid-June of 1966, was Paint It Black by the Rolling Stones.
Wow.
So think about how...
Back to that other one. Like, I can't believe that Nancy Sinatra did a remake of Jessica Simpson's song.
I know, like, how bullshit is that? Like, how unoriginal could she be?
Respect the original artist. Yeah.
Absolutely. And Michael Bolton, he redid, and Percy Sledge redid Michael Bolton's song, When a Man Loves a Woman. It's crazy. Yeah.
Well, Ozzy ripped off Lil Jon for Crazy Train. That awful remix.
Yeah! So
okay.
But think about how young Mick and Keith were in 1966, though. Like, think about...
Well, they were just probably coming to America.
They were,
the British invasion.
So I was reading in like 1966, Pink Floyd was just like discovering their psychedelic sound, like
back when they were with Syd Barrett still, and all that.
Yeah. And the Rolling Stones were obviously just getting bigger. And in mid-June, so their song "Painted Black" was the big song in mid-June 1966.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Painted Black. And in mid-June of 1966, go ahead.
Well, that's interesting because Painted Black is about heroin, right? So, like, I didn't know they were. I thought, like, when there's 1966, I think of the Rolling Stones as like 14 and 15 years old, just hitting the vape cartridges, hitting the weed for the first time. Like, I didn't know they're fucking around with heroin and stuff.
Yeah,
already.
so
but maybe they weren't. That doesn't mean they're doing it.
It could have just been a song that they read, right?
It might not be about heroin at all. Maybe.
Yeah, like on the charts.
That kid lied to me.
Yeah, I was looking at the charts from 1966, and the Beatles dominated. They had a bunch of songs there. Like Paperback Writer was on there. Had a bunch of different songs, but those are the songs that I really liked.
Yeah.
And in Painted Black was number 1 in mid-June of 1966.
Wow.
And that month, that period, mid-June of 1966, that's when Canada's first ever spree killer decided to grab a shotgun, walk down Ford Boulevard in Riverside with a belly full of beer and a mind full of dark thoughts and bad intentions. And within a matter of minutes, the lives of a lot of people would be changed forever by one man. And let's meet that man. His name is Mathew Charles Lamb.
I don't want to meet that man.
I don't want to meet him.
Mathew Charles Lamb. Okay, you're registered.
There. Matthew Lamb. And by 1966, Mathew Lamb was a very disturbed young man who had been in a lot of trouble with the law. Shall we discuss?
Sure.
All right. Mathew Charles Lamb was born on January 5th, 1948 in Windsor to a 15-year-old unwed mother who quickly abandoned him and left Matthew in the care of various relatives. He seldomly saw his mother growing up, and his dad was allegedly killed in the U.S. when he was a baby. So, tough start.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. So when he wasn't in foster care or with extended family, he ended up spending a lot of his childhood growing up under the supervision of his grandmother and his step-grandfather, Christopher Collins, on 2136 York Street in South Central neighborhood of Windsor.
Christopher Collins. Nice enunciation. I like it.
Thank you. Our enunciation has been complimented, so we appreciate that. Let's just say that Chris wasn't a big fan of Matt. He resented him, I assume for being a burden. Chris was very physically and emotionally abusive to Matt and would call him a little bastard daily. So that's a nice little thing to call a kid growing up. Matt was also a witness to Chris beating his grandmother regularly as a small boy as well. This led to Matthew having some emotional problems and violent tendencies. I would imagine so, right?
That's par for the course, yeah.
For example, he would lock his cousins into a closet and threaten them.
Oh, the old Dudley. The old Dudley Potter.
One time, he beat a cousin so bad that he needed medical attention.
Open the door with his fucking head. Get him out of here.
Get him out of here.
Open that attic door with his fucking head.
Harry, no. Dudley.
Come back. I'm going to do it again because I'm fucking crazy.
'Cause I'm crazy. Now, that could just be little kids growing up. This is just like, when my sister used to lock me into a suitcase and throw me down the stairs. What, you didn't do that to Ricky?
No.
You never did that?
In the Herbie Kirby sometimes.
In the Herbie Kirby?
Yeah.
What's like the craziest thing you did to your
My brother never brought me to the departures at Windsor Airport and put it on.
That's true.
The craziest thing? I don't know. I knew some kids some brothers who put his other brother in the dryer and turned it on.
Really?
Yeah.
He got him to fit.
Yeah, he got burned.
Really?
Extra starchy.
You're not going to ask me about the suitcase? We'll just save that for my therapist.
Jeez, what kind of trauma did the suitcase? Oh, that's so horrible.
I'm just kidding.
Which sister did this?
My sister Beth. She used to trick me into getting into this suitcase to have fun, and then she'd be like, "Oh my god, the key is lost. Oh my god, you're locked in," which I would freak out.
I had a babysitter. Sorry, go ahead.
And then to get me out, she'd be like, "Okay, the only way I could get you out is I have to throw you down the stairs in this suitcase."
So it's like a science gravity lesson and...
Exactly. And then miraculously, she would find the key and she would get me out. And then about 10 minutes later, I'd be right back in the suitcase.
I had a babysitter. Anytime we misbehaved, she'd grab the phone and she would just turn on, off, like 700. Like, I'm calling the pirates. The pirates are going to come get you back. No, please don't get the pirates to come get me. No, I'll be a good boy, sorry. Because I thought she was going to give me to Captain Cook and we were going to the Philippines. Like, she brought out a map and said, like, you're going here.
Did you ever tell Peggy this?
No, I was so scared. She said if I ever told Peggy, she'd give me to worse pirates. Literally.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Oh, this is like a therapy session.
Oh yeah.
Oh my god.
Stuff. Yeah. I learned a lot from that.
Okay, but like, so that's like harmless kid stuff. But like, but Matt,
harmless.
what Matthew harmless?
We're not.
Yeah. But so that was harmless kid stuff. But this wasn't harmless kid stuff gone wrong. like when Mathew Lamb did something, he meant it.
Okay.
And his friend Greg Sweet, a childhood friend of his, said that when they were about 7 years old...
Greg Sweet is his name?
Yeah.
Oh my god. As if you couldn't think of a more innocent name for this.
Yes.
This guy's he's probably gonna be in 16 Sweet Pieces in a second.
No. So his friend, he reports this at he tells this to the author later, said that when they were 7 years old, Matt held a knife to a young child's throat and forced him to eat dog poop.
Gregory! Oh, Gregory, come here!
Yeah.
Oh my god. Is it like on Step Brothers? He's like, eat the white dog poop,
Exactly.
motherfucker.
Yeah, he could have been. So that's the kind of stuff that he was pulling pretty young.
Everyone's done that, right?
Not me. You guys are fucked in the South. Anyway, so Matthew, by age 13, puberty, his teachers at St. Jude's School noticed that he was detached and quiet at school. He wasn't interested in making friends. He would decline invitations to parties because he said he didn't like to dance.
Was it like super bad, but instead of drawing dicks, he's just drawing pictures of steaming piles of dog shit all day? Just pushing someone's face into it? Yeah, he was like a dog shitter.
So he would, like I said, he would decline invitations to parties because he said he didn't like to dance.
Oh.
And around this time, he started carrying a knife around with him, and he was fascinated with guns. And he also began making crude bombs at home and accidentally set off a bomb made from a .50 caliber shell and sprayed shrapnel into his leg.
Oh my god.
Mm-hmm. So according to his friend Sweet,
leg of lamb.
Make some keto.
I'll leave. I'll take myself out. I'm sorry. Right, see you, everybody. Bye.
So according to his childhood friend Sweet, Lamb joined the Sea Cadets, but didn't really last long in that.
Greggy Sweets.
Yeah. Mathew Lamb also tried to join the Ku Klux Klan, but couldn't find a local chapter to join. So it turns out he was a racist too.
Just go to Walmart. Go to Zellers.
So Matthew's reign of terror with Windsor police began on February 10th, 1964, when he was 16 years old. Matthew was hanging outside of the teen Valentine's Day dance at Riverside Arena when he decided to jump on the back of a police officer and start punching the
Oh, so he can dance.
Yes. So he started punching the cop about the face for no reason.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. He was just a cop that was off duty making some money to security guard the dance.
He probably just didn't want to have to go to the dance because he couldn't dance.
I guess this was at the end of the dance and people were walking out and maybe he wanted to make a scene of himself.
You've all seen that episode of Friends or Arthur. Arthur can't go to the dance, so he punches out a rent-a-cop. So he's embarrassed, doesn't want to see the girl. So Arthur brings a knife to school.
Arthur brings a shank. So
having fun isn't hard when you commit assault on a police officer.
That's good shit. So Mathew Lamb was arrested. He was found with a knife and brass knuckles and would later serve 6 months at the House of Concord in London, which was like a juvenile detention center. Okay. But it was run by the Salvation Army. It was based on rehabilitation.
Brett says juvenile center. I hear con college.
Exactly. Who knows what he learned there? So when Matt got out of there,
learned how to dance.
That's right. For somebody.
Dance, boy.
When Matt got out, step-grandpa Chris shipped him off to live with an uncle named Earl. He went to Assumption College while he lived with Earl and did well at the school, but he got suspended for bringing a knife to school, and so after failing to complete grade 10, he dropped out to find work.
Okay. Gotcha.
So he spent the summer of 1964 hanging out in Tecumseh, hanging out with friends who let him borrow their guns. But after an accident when he was hunting and almost shot his friend, they didn't really let him borrow their guns anymore. So on Christmas Eve, December 24th, 1964, this co-owner of the Lakeview Marina in Tecumseh, he made a nice rink for the boys in the area to go play hockey one night. Okay. And after everyone was all done, Lamb was wasted. And so after everyone was done, he really didn't have anywhere to go, so he just stayed there behind. And then he smashed the front window of a sporting goods store, the one that was letting the boys play hockey right near there, and he stole 3 revolvers and a double-barreled shotgun. When the shop's co-owner, the nice guy that was letting the boys play hockey beside the short, when the co-owner and a police constable showed up to confront Matthew, he busted off 2 shots with a .22 caliber revolver after trying to bait them to a ditch, to try and
wow,
snipe them out.
But he was able to steal them from the store and shoot them? Like, you think they have locks on them or something, don't they?
It's 1966.
Wow.
He broke the big front window.
It's 1964. They probably just had a bowl of cigarettes and revolvers at every door.
That's
just
true.
For children, for everyone.
Just as a door stopper.
Yeah. If you want a gun, take one to go. Take one for your wife at home.
You sign up for a credit card, you get a free gun.
Please, more guns and cigarettes. It's the 60s. We love guns and
Light
cigarettes.
Light up, kid.
Booze.
So he busted off 2 shots at these people with a .22 caliber revolver, but he missed both times.
Wow.
So the police constable said, "I'm not fucking around." He returned several shots, and like after a few moments, Matthew gives up. He goes, "Okay, wow. I give up," and he gives himself up. So Matthew spends his 17th birthday in jail on January 5th.
This kid really could have used TikTok. He just wants attention. He's just doing these things.
Absolutely,
you know what I mean? Like,
he didn't have a very good home at all. Like he just did. No one cared about him. That's right. His grandmother cared about him a bit, but his step grandfather was such an asshole that he really just dominated him and
Chris
just made
Kringle.
him.
What was his name?
Chris Collins.
Yeah. Not Chris Kringle.
So Matthew spends his 17th birthday in jail on January 5th. And was tried and convicted of breaking and enter, possession of a .22 caliber revolver, and danger to public peace. So
17.
Disturbing the peace. So that's right, Luda. A pre-sentence report is done, which is used to search your social legal background and determine your sentence. So the report labeled Matthew as exceptionally violent. So Magistrate J. Arthur Hanrahan sentenced Matthew to the maximum amount of time he could, 24 months at Kingston Penitentiary, a maximum security prison.
The judge's name was Hammerhand?
Hanrahan.
I thought he said Hammerhand, like 20 years, and boom, he just hammers that hand right down.
I didn't even think of that Hammerhand.
Judge Hammerhand.
Hammerhand. Illegal. Item 9.
A million years.
So Matthew is only 17, and he is a first-time offender as an adult, and they sent him to Kingston Pen in April of 1965.
Damn.
Soon after he arrived, he assaulted another inmate and was put in solitary confinement. Yeah. So, smart move. Right. Yeah. One evening, a guard found Matthew kneeling beside his bed, shoving a broom dowel up his ass.
Okay. I feel like I'm there.
Later, when he was on janitorial duty, like months later, he shoved a mop handle up his ass and walked around the cell block just to annoy the guards.
You know why I did it? Because I'm fucking crazy.
Because I'm crazy.
That's why.
Lamb also tried to commit suicide at Kingston Pen and had visible scars on his wrists from it. In March 1966, his behavior was labeled as bordering on psychotic, so a psychiatrist named Dr. George Scott committed him to Kingston Psychiatric Hospital for a month of observation.
Suffering from broom handle analitis. Broom handle fictionitis.
He said he was being hypomanic at that time. So
what does that mean?
So Matthew was labeled at the time as being borderline or having marginal psychotic tendencies. So he was described as being an extremely immature young man with a fascination with guns who had very little control of his behavior and had shown signs of an obvious mental breakdown. So that was George Scott's analysis at first. So some of the doctors that he was under care of thought he was playing immature games with the prison system. Okay. So Lamb had shown slight signs of improvement in his condition, and so the doctors could not conclusively declare him mentally unsound and prevent his parole. So on April 18th, 1966, Lamb returned to prison with a report from the psych hospital saying he was likely to recommit crimes if released. So Dr. George Scott signed off on his release, but was nervous to do so.
Wow. Do you think he was just doing that on purpose to seem crazy? Like, there's no way they're like, all right, Matthew, you can clean up this hallway. They hand him the broom handle, and he just looks at it. He's like, this needs to go inside me. This is happening right now instead of using it.
That's the question you're going to ask a lot this episode. So, therefore, Matt, now 18, was eligible for parole and was later released from Kingston.
He got like 10 years, didn't he?
No. You got 2 years.
Oh, sorry.
24 months, right? So but he got sentenced in the beginning of 65. Yeah. So in mid 66, he was now 18. Pick up sticks. So he's now 18 and eligible for parole and was released from Kingston Pen on June 8th, 1966, after serving 14 of his 24-month stint.
Wow.
So about 60%. Matthew was placed in the care of his uncle Stanley.
So about 10 inches of a full broom.
Yeah, 10. Yeah, it took 14 of the 24-inch broom. Yeah, we might not. I don't think we'll keep that. I don't think we'll keep that.
Sorry,
it's okay. Matthew was placed in the care of his uncle Stanley Hasketh, who lived at 1912 Ford Boulevard, which is 1 block north of Tecumseh Road. Uncle Stanley had 2 kids, Chucky, who was 6, and Amy, who was 3. So let's fast forward to June 25th, 1966. 17 days later, Matt was out of prison. He had a roof over his head. He was living with his uncle.
I melded the words pick up sticks when you said sticks.
Thank you. The first thing that I wrote when I wrote my script was pick up sticks as soon as I wrote.
And I always think of Kathy Bates just leaning in and saying,
there you
pick
go.
Up sticks.
Pick up sticks. And that's right. And there's another Kathy Bates reference.
What's for dessert? Squirrel.
Squirrel. Oh, what part of the snake are we going to be having for dinner?
Last week when you said...
Now, if snakes don't really have parts, but if I was to say we was on eating anything, I'm saying you was eating his knee.
When you said last week, like, grab an oar, and you shut your
face. Oh, I loved it.
Only you would remember.
Oh, that's my favorite part. My favorite part is Kathy Bates being told to shut up. Yes. But Matt's got it pretty good, man. Like, Mathew Lamb, he's got cousins. He has cousins to, like, kind of mentor. He has a chance at being part of a family. Mathew should be happy, but on this day, Mathew is a little irritated. So, Mathew had to get a job as a condition of his parole. So he picked a 2-year woodworking apprenticeship, but he doesn't really like it, obviously.
A broom handle shop?
Oh, I didn't even think about that. He's making a lot of broom dowels, probably. So he's working on a Saturday. It's hot, and his boss asked him if he wanted more overtime. Mathew got mad and said no because he had already worked 62 hours that week. So he left, he went home, and he got back to Ford Boulevard around 3 p.m. on June 25th. So Mathew then babysat Stanley's 2 children that night while consuming 8 beers in a matter of 6 hours. He then put the 2 children to bed and sat down to watch a violent John Wayne movie, and after a little while, he fell asleep. So for now, Mathew Charles Lamb is passed out in his bed at 1912 Ford Boulevard around 9 p.m., right?
Okay, John Wayne's on the screen.
John Wayne's there.
Yeah.
Hey there, baby sister.
Hey there, pilgrims.
That's one thing I've just never watched is a John Wayne movie. And like Glenn and Mitch,
really
right? They
on
love
TV.
it. Yeah,
They used to be like back in the 90s.
I'm sure they watched it growing up.
Yeah, I love old westerns.
Never watched much. Like even like Clint Eastwood and stuff, never really watched it. So, so one line that really stood out to me by the book's author, Will Toffin, while researching this story from Watching the Devil Dance, which is a good book. You guys should buy it, and I'll like plug it at the end. Is quote.
So we can dance.
So we can dance. Yes.
Dum.
I didn't even think about that either. Quote, police officers know there are 2 rules that parents instinctively deny. 1, really bad things can happen to innocent children. And 2, parents and police cannot change rule number 1. So with that being said, let's introduce Edith Tchaikowski.
Preach.
So let's introduce Edith Tchaikowski. She is a 20-year-old nurse's aide at a nursing home, and she lives in an apartment with her mom and little brother, Richard, on Monmouth.
Little Richard?
Yeah. Piano riff woo. Her mom, whose name is also Edith, has 5 children, 3 of which are out of the house by 1966. Edith was married to their father, John, but marital and financial problems throughout the 50s changed that. So they're divorced. Times are tough and money was tight, so Edith went to work, so young Edith, went to work right after high school as a nurse's aide and like took the bus to work. She pinches pennies, she tries to help out the family. Edith works hard, and it's a Saturday night, so she makes plans to go visit her older brother Kenneth and his wife Charmaine, who is 8 months pregnant. They live on Ford Boulevard. Edith is hesitant and says she doesn't feel like going out, and I understand because she lives on Monmouth and had to travel to Ford Boulevard in East Windsor and Riverside. She probably had to go take a bus. She had to make a transfer. You know, it's the worst. You know what I mean?
Ford Boulevard is past Drulard. It's more east than
Yes.
Drulard, right?
So
way more east.
Yes,
Okay,
way
you're
more.
right.
So Paulette is where Riverside started.
Pizza Plus, yeah, Paulette.
Yeah,
Okay.
Pizza Plus at Wyandotte. You know what I'm talking about. And then it goes all the way to the WFCU Center, basically Lozon. That's where Riverside is.
Yeah.
That's their town. That's their borders, right? So you
And
get
see
me?
that, Willie? That's us.
That's right.
That's where
and
we
so
are.
she's going from Monmouth all the way to in like South Walker, in North Walkerville.
Right there.
Yeah, right
That's
near your
Monmouth.
house. And she's going all the way to Ford Boulevard. So it takes a while. So like you understand why she might not want to go. And we understand because we took that bus life for a long time. Like, and it's not fun. Taking the 2. Can you tell me a little story about taking the crosstown 2?
Fuck the bus, man. Oh my god.
It's tough.
It's the worst.
It's tough.
Especially when you go from driving a car to having to take the bus.
Yes.
It's the worst.
It's the absolute. When we were in early college, like me and you were bus buddies.
If I see anyone I know while I'm driving, if I see anyone I know, I always offer them a ride. I try my best. Even if someone I don't really know, like they like, because I know what it's like waiting.
We do.
It sucks.
Yeah, we have walked across the city because we didn't have a ride or money to get on the bus. So anyway,
and I'm not getting an e-bike. I don't care.
Not a chance. Oh, bro, don't get me started on e-bikes. I'm gonna go so mad. I hate those things so much. Anyway,
I'll drive a Razor scooter before I drive an e-bike.
Oh, dude, I'll walk on bare feet before I get on an e-bike. Anyway, so Edith's mom encourages her to go out and socialize because she's 20 years old and she works hard, so she deserves to go out.
Go outside.
Go outside, kid. Have some fun.
What time of year is it? What month
is it? It's June. It's
June.
June. It's late June.
Go to the fireworks.
Yeah, exactly. So Edith leaves her house at 7:44 Monmouth to catch the bus and go to her brother's house at 1635 Ford Boulevard. So Edith waved goodbye to her mother as she walked to the bus stop during the early evening hours of June 25th, 1966. Little did they know, this would be the last time the two Ediths, mother and daughter, would ever speak. So Edith goes and visits her brother Kenneth and his wife Charmaine. It's hot and humid in Windsor in late June, so they stay out and they visit till about 10 p.m. That's when Edith decides she's going to go walk to Tecumseh Avenue to go catch the bus home. So Ken and Charmaine were not going to walk with her to the bus stop at first, but they changed their minds and they caught up with her across the street on the east side of Ford Boulevard. But as soon as they do, they bump into some of their neighbors, who are Don Melissa, Vincent Franco, and Andy Wallach. So quickly here. So Andy Wallach was an engineering major at University of Windsor. He was a star athlete in softball and junior B hockey. Andy was the top scorer for the Windsor Lancers hockey team in 1965 and 1966. So this guy's a stud.
Nice.
So he's childhood friends with Don Melissa, who lost an eye as a child to an illness, but was still a good athlete. Don was 21 at the time and was going to St. Clair College for business and computers. So he's a really smart guy. Their third friend there, Vincent Franco, he was 19 and is of Spanish and Portuguese descent. And he came to Canada from Trinidad and Tobago when he was 7. So everyone in this group of 6 people are old neighbors from the Ford Boulevard area. Okay. Because Edith and her family grew up on that street before their parents divorced. Her brother stayed there to kind of keep family ties there. It was a big deal. So the 3 guys were standing outside Andy's home discussing whether to go to the A&W drive-thru restaurant on Tecumseh or go all the way to the Canada Tavern to go watch Hockey Night in Canada on their state-of-the-art color TV.
Wow.
Boys, do you want to go watch the game on the color TV?
Big decision.
Leafs and Habs, come on, let's go.
Do we go to A&W?
Or A&W, right? The drive-in at the time. That's right. So 66, think about that.
It would be a drive-in, right?
It would be fun, yeah.
Obviously.
So these people all know each other.
It'd be like an event. Like, you go to A&W now, you fucking...
You used to see all your friends.
Drive-through listening to Taylor Swift, and you leave, and...
No texting that back then.
Back then, drive-through, you see everyone, you know everyone there.
Yep.
Getting drunk.
Hell yeah.
Fights.
Drinking and driving. Going to the Red Barn on Central and Tecumseh. Fights, yeah. Did you say fights? Yeah.
Well, how we're talking about taking the bus and then taking...
Drinking and driving. That's why we had to take the bus. All right. So Don and Edith both went to St. Therese Elementary School. So everyone is chatting, and the 3 men haven't decided what they're going to do yet. So they all decide they're going to walk down Ford Boulevard with Edith and her brother and her sister-in-law as a group to go down to Tecumseh Road. So nice guys.
6 of them?
There's 6 people.
Okay,
so,
I feel like I'm there. Okay.
Thank you.
A&W. Gotcha.
Perfect. You're recapping perfect spots for each. And so, unfortunately, they never reached their destination. Because around that time, Mathew Lamb awoke from his drunken slumber, and he was not in a good mood.
Uh-oh.
So Mathew got up, walked down the hall, and grabbed his uncle's double-barreled shotgun from a closet.
I'm down with killing and shoving broom handles up my ass, and I'm all out of broom handles.
So Mathew reached for the... It's okay. So Mathew reached for the top shelf of the...
Oh my God, no.
Yeah, Mathew reached for the top shelf of the closet and found a box of ammo. He emptied it onto the kitchen counter, loaded both barrels, shoved his pockets full of bullets, and walked out the front door of 1912 Ford Boulevard into the hot, humid summer evening of June 25th, 1966, around 10:15 p.m. So Lamb walked down the east side of Ford Boulevard, shotgun in hand, and he crossed Coronation Street. So this is right near Coronation Public School.
Why?
Why?
Why is he doing this?
We'll find
Just
out.
cuz?
Yeah, so this is right near, like...
How bad was this John Wayne movie?
Yeah, this is...
What the fuck?
Yeah. So this is right by the old, like, St. Joe's High School right there. Okay. Coronation Public School. So this is, like... There's a lot of families there. Yeah. So...
Where I go on my shotgun walks.
Of course.
Usually.
So Lamb walks down the east side of Ford Boulevard, shotgun in hand, and he crossed Coronation Street, and right off the corner, he runs into two little boys who are 10 and 6 in the front yard of 1884 Ford Boulevard. They are friends with Lamb's nephew, and their parents are having a party in the garage. And later, the kids think that maybe it was the party that woke Mathew Lamb up, and maybe that's what kind of startled him. But being a little kid, 6-year-old Jack LeHue didn't realize Lamb was holding a gun and went to the sidewalk and said, "Hi, Uncle Matt," because that's what he knew him as, because he plays with his little nephew. To which Lamb responded by growling and shoving his shotgun in the child's face.
Wow.
So there's a lot of speculation in the book about why he didn't shoot this kid, but like ultimately he doesn't, and he just walks around, little Jack LeHue, and marches on into the night with his shotgun.
Did the kid know it was a gun when he shoved it in his face?
Oh, after that, yes,
Probably.
And he was very shocked. Just 3 houses down, there's another house having a party at 1864 Ford Boulevard. So this is a busy evening busy Saturday evening in Windsor. So a Mr. and Mrs. Leo Shushu are having their 25th anniversary party. Their house is full of people, their porch lights are on, people are coming in and out of their garage, and this house party is allegedly Mathew Lamb's target. The street lights are on the opposite side of the street, so it makes it very shady on the east side of the street. And I walked this path, so I get what they're talking about here. And so he moves off the sidewalk and stands in the darkness of a young tree.
Did you shove the gun in your dog's face to pretend like you were shoving it in a kid's face?
No, I just had a leash.
Stand there, Kirby. You're scared. Pretend you're scared.
So Mathew stands behind a young tree, and he put his shotgun on his left arm, and he just stood there watching the party from a distance and waited, thinking about his next move. Unfortunately, Matt's next move was made for him because right at that time, our group of 6 friends, Vincent, Don, Andy, Edith, Kenneth, and pregnant Charmaine, are walking down the 1800 block of Ford Boulevard, and they notice this big house with all the lights on, with cars parked on both sides of the street. The group of friends are chatting, and they look to their left to check out the party in the garage. Edith and Don are at the front of the group when all of a sudden they see this guy just standing in the next yard over. The group's sudden presence startled Lamb, and he had to think on the fly, so he turned to his left, shotgun in hand, and screamed, "Hands up!" His gun pointed right at Don and Edith. Everyone in the group but Edith immediately stopped when they heard Lamb shout, but she kept on walking and tried to go around him, probably thinking he was just like a drunken fool from the party playing a prank.
Yeah.
So when Edith tried to move around Mathew, he stuck his shotgun in her abdomen and pulled the trigger, putting a full load of shotgun pellets into her abdomen. She hurled over onto the sidewalk, and for 20 full seconds, everyone stood still and didn't say anything, crippled by shock and fear because Lamb still had his double-barrel shotgun pointed at the group.
20 seconds. They just stood there?
Just freeze. This is fight or flight, right? Basically,
Wow.
This is what happens, right? So with everyone's fight or flight instincts kicking in, that's when panic sunk in for the rest of the group. So Lamb shouted again, "Hands up!" And Andy Wallach obeyed and raised his arms and gave Lamb a brand new target. Lamb fired from a distance from about 2 meters and hit Andy in the abdomen and also hit Kenneth with shotgun pellets in his right arm and hip.
He was the only guy to actually put his hands up and he shot him?
Yeah, so he's the only one that... Yep. He just got his attention basically, and so he just turned and just kind of bang. So that and he also hit Kenneth, who is Edith's brother. So there's 3 people who are shot now. So that's when shit got crazy, dude. So Vincent Franco, the 19-year-old, he's the youngest of the group. He sprinted to the side door of the house having the party and tried to find help, but instead grabbed a beer bottle, smashed it to make it a weapon, and went back to protect Andy, who was on the ground, shot in the abdomen. So he's hurled over. Vincent goes back to defend Andy.
Yeah.
After the second shot, Don Melissa, who was at the front of the group, he ran right past Lamb and tried knocking on the front door of 1872, asking them to phone the police. But a Mrs. Dupuy opened the door a crack, saying that there was no phone, and slammed the door in his face.
Oh, no.
So meanwhile, Kenneth and...
After hearing gunshots.
Yeah. So, but she redeems herself later.
Okay.
So meanwhile...
Good for you, Mr. Dupuy.
So meanwhile, Kenneth and Charmaine ran to the garage at the back of the property at 1864 to go get help because Kenneth is shot.
Did Miss Doopy start loading up shotgun shells, loading up the AK as soon as they shut the door?
I wish, but unfortunately that's not what happened.
Putting on the vest.
So Kenneth and Charmaine go to the party, right, to go get help. At first, people thought they were party crashers, and they were, like, pissed that they were there. But then they realized that Kenneth
get your blood off my carpet, you scum. You weren't invited.
But then they saw the blood on Ken's clothes, and then they started to panic because they started talking about this madman on the block. Yeah. So all of a sudden, someone turned off the lights in the garage to hide everyone from Lamb, and this basically saved everyone in that garage. So once his victims had run away, Mathew Lamb went on the prowl. He sprinted across the street while he cracked open his shotgun. He dropped the smoking shells out of the gun, reached into his pocket, and reloaded both barrels with his sights now on 1867 Ford Boulevard, and he is at a full sprint. 19-year-old Grace Dunlop had turned on her driveway light at 1867 Ford when she thought she had heard gunshots across the street. So she walked down the stairs to open up her screen door, but didn't see Mathew Lamb sprinting up her driveway. As soon as he saw her shadow in the doorway, he fired his shotgun right at her, point blank range. Boom!
Wow!
He blasts the door frame. She gets hit. Grace's fiance Derek was in the living room. He was knocked off his chair when he heard the sound of the gunshot go off into his living room, essentially. So he picked himself off the floor after, and he rushed over to the hallway. He found his fiance slumped over, unconscious on the stairs, face down with wood chips and metal from the doorframe all over her. So, but where's Mathew? Right? Like, there's a wake of bodies, but no one knows where Mathew is. He's on the prowl again. So Mathew, this time, he is running northwest for 2 blocks through backyards, bucks off a shot at a passing car, too, just as he wakes his way to Westminster.
Grand Theft Auto style.
That's right. Yeah. Suddenly, he just stops at a house with a long driveway, and he decides to go pay a visit to the owners of 1793 Westminster, where a woman named Anne Heaton lives with her husband. So Anne is sitting in her living room. Her husband, Forrest, is asleep, getting ready to leave for their summer vacation in the morning. She is startled when she hears a loud knock on her front door, so she turns on the porch light to see who the hell this could be knocking on her door at this hour, right? Can you imagine like an older woman maybe just fed up watching her stories at the end of the day.
Trying to make candles in here.
That's right. Like, I'm getting my shit ready to go on vacation tomorrow. What do you want? So she opens up the door and she sees a young man with a shotgun in his hand. And she asked him, what did he want? And he says, I'm going to shoot you.
There's no phone.
There's no phone here, lady.
Get out of here. I'm not buying your shit.
So he says, I'm going to shoot you. Upon hearing this, Anne turned off the porch light, shut the screen door, but Lamb forced his way in behind her. So then he and Anne just stood there in silence. Mathew looked around, seemingly in a daze, but he didn't say anything. So Anne was like, the fuck is wrong with this guy? He's like, I don't think he's going to hurt me. So she yelled for her husband, who was asleep at the back, to call the police and get his gun to come protect her. But he didn't wake up.
Oh, he slept through it.
So for another few minutes...
Never heard the end of that.
Yeah, I'm sure. So for another few minutes, Anne and Mathew just stared at each other, and then he just quietly...
Few minutes?
For a few minutes, dude. She says it was just like a stare down. They just stared at each other. So after a few minutes, he just quietly walks out the front door. He just lingers on the front porch steps for a few seconds, and then walks to the back of her property.
Wow.
So she's shaken by the experience, but like she's not deterred enough, apparently, to wake her husband up because he had a long drive in the morning.
Or she seduced him. Maybe that's why.
I don't think that's what happened. But Anne also decides not to call the police at the time because, it's late and who needs
what?
to like it's.
She doesn't call the police.
She doesn't call the police.
Oh, she definitely seduced him. Then.
But Anne does go file a police report in the morning.
False.
So she didn't call the cops at the time, but she did go the next morning.
Wake them.
She didn't want to wake them. She didn't want to wake her husband.
You think after her husband didn't wake up, she'd want to wake up the whole fucking town?
Oh man!
So a bunch of people didn't get woken up
exactly
that night.
So
half the people in the house didn't get woken up.
Exactly. She doesn't think it's a big deal. She doesn't decide to call the police that night, but she does call. She does make a report in the morning.
Strongly worded letter.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, madman.
Yeah. She goes and files a report the next morning with the Riverside Police Department, and she was unaware that she had just had a stare down with a maniac. The guy on the desk is like, did you know that was probably the guy who shot 4 people, like shot 4 people last night? She's like, what? So let's go back. So at this time that night, so where's Mathew? At the time, he's in Ann Heaton's backyard, laying on his belly behind a small hill. So
when? The next day?
No, that night. So she didn't call the cops, right? So he goes to her backyard.
So she goes back to bed, and
he's still there. And he's still there.
Backyard.
He's in her backyard, right?
What the fuck, Ann?
That's right.
Oh my god.
And he finds a little small hill in her backyard, and so he props his shotgun on the hill, and he lines up his shells, and he has like I said, he's got the shotgun mounted on the hill, and he's got it pointed toward the driveway.
She could get charged with aiding and abetting at this point. She's literally helping him set up his next perimeter.
Yeah. So what police think is that after...
Should she make him a fucking sandwich too?
Yeah. So what police think after they go to Ann Heaton's the next day is that he was expecting them to show up and get into a shootout with the cops after Ann called. He was expecting to go bother her enough that she would call the cops, say that some guy bothered me, he's in my backyard.
Did he not think the cops were going to come when he shot 2 people
at
another block?
I don't know. So this is what they think after, right? So Ann didn't call them though, so they didn't get called to his position.
So he's just waiting there?
That's right. So Mathew just sat there and laid in her backyard, waiting for a wave of police cars and sirens and stuff that never came. Nothing came. So after a while, Mathew lost interest. He left his gun and his ammo right there.
You gotta admit, that's kind of funny. It's a sad story. It's kind of funny that he already shot these people. He's like, I got a bunch of people coming. This is gonna be fucking Grand Theft Auto. I'm going out big. And an old lady, she's not even bothered enough to call the cops. And he's like waiting there. He's like, and no one comes. Like they don't feel like he's not important enough. Like he must have felt so humiliated.
Exactly, right?
Oh my god.
So after a while, Mathew lost interest. Apparently, he left his gun and his ammo like right where he left it in Ann Heaton's backyard, and he walked across the fields to Paulette Road. He hailed He hailed down a taxi at Tecumseh Road and took the short ride back to his uncle's house at 1912 Ford Boulevard.
He just got back into a cab and just...
That's right. He paid the cab driver, he walked into his uncle's house, and went to bed without even changing his clothes. So less than an hour had passed since he had woken up in a stupor and decided to go on a shooting spree, and now it was time to go to bed.
Wow.
So he may have noticed but probably didn't care, but by the time he got back to his uncle's house on Ford Boulevard, his street was teeming with emergency vehicles, police cruisers, news outlets, and a large crowd had gathered less than 50 meters from his house, and all those people were asking the same thing. Why? Like, why did this happen?
Well, wait a minute. They knew it was him, right?
No.
Oh, they didn't?
They didn't know it was him.
His neighbors
yet.
didn't know him?
Well, it just so happens on that night in June 1966, the Windsor police was working with low numbers because it was the annual awards night. This is the biggest social event of the year for cops.
The police awards?
That's right, the policeman's ball.
What?
So this is a city-funded event attended by the cultural elite of the city and politics, etc. So when the call went out that there was a madman with a shotgun on Ford Boulevard, they said the sound of all the sirens and the sight of all the lights flashing from all the available units in the city echoed throughout the night as a bunch of liquored up policemen in nice suits and ties all raced toward the crime scene in their cruisers. Can you imagine?
So they just left the ball?
Yeah, like they're like, what?
Oh, they were hammered.
Oh, dude. So when the first unmarked vehicle showed up, all they saw was Vincent Franco standing over Andy Wallach with a broken bottle. So like within a few minutes, there's cops there, right? Wow. After first shots are fired. So, but all they see is Vincent Franco standing over Andy with a broken bottle, so they think he's the assailant.
Oh, okay.
So the first cop there tackles Vincent away from Andy, but it's quickly discovered that Vincent's not the assailant, and then they go to help Andy, right? But where's Edith?
I don't know.
So Edith is lying on the sidewalk of Ford Boulevard outside of 1872 with her friend Dawn by her side, holding her head, while Mrs. Dupuy, the owner of 1872, is desperately trying to help Edith by stuffing Kleenex into her wounds. But she's fruitlessly trying to stop the bleeding as the help arrives. So here's a quote from the book, and it's from Jack LeHue, the 6-year-old boy who had Lamb's shotgun shoved in his face. This is just 3 houses down from his. So him and his dad and his brother walked down to kind of try and help after. So this is from Watching the Devil Dance, quote, "I'll never forget how the lady's heartbeat was so noticeable as she lay there. Every time blood would squirt out from her stomach, her heart would beat hard, her chest rising and falling. After so much blood had been lost, her heartbeat became weaker and her chest didn't rise anymore. The ambulance driver arrived and put a compression bandage on her stomach, and the little fountains of blood stopped." Unquote. So little did police know So little did the police and the residents of Ford Boulevard know that the man responsible for all of that carnage had just walked by them unnoticed.
And just slept.
And is now sleeping.
Wow.
Right? Okay. So the police were looking for a shooter in the area, right? So they thought he was probably still prowling. So they looked in backyards, garages, alleys, and in fields, but they didn't really interview people that well.
Yeah.
Right? Like I said, they had a skeleton crew that night. It's awards night. People may be not doing what they think they should be doing. I don't know.
Yeah.
Different protocols back then. So Vincent Franco and Don Melessa.
Respect them for leaving the awards
hell yeah.
to go out. That's
man, yeah. At the time, it is what it is, man. They did the best that they could, but unfortunately, they kind of missed a few things. So Vincent Franco and Don Melessa, so two of the eyewitnesses, so they were spoken to very briefly, and then they were basically told that they were on their own because a lot of their focus was on the people who were dying, essentially. Yeah. So they didn't canvass the neighborhood very well or appropriately either because there were a few people who knew exactly who had committed these crimes. Imelda...
They just could have asked them.
Imelda LaHue, the mother of 6-year-old Jack LaHue, couldn't sleep that night, so she waited on her front porch all night for the police to come and talk to her so she could tell them who the shooter was, but they didn't.
Wow.
So, quote from the book, "Police officers walked around our house all night, but no one thought to ask if we knew anything about the shooter. We identified him as Mathew Lamb, but we could have saved them a lot of trouble, but we assumed they knew what they were doing." Unquote.
Wow.
So let's go to the hospital. So where Edith Tchaikowski, Kenneth Tchaikowski, Andy Wallach, and Grace Dunlop are wheeled to the ER at Met Hospital, which is just a few minutes away. So they get there around 10:30 p.m. The only person who is conscious at this time is Kenneth. So Grace Dunlop was in critical condition when she got to the hospital, and she ultimately lost a kidney. But she would go on to survive this madman's bullets simply because her door frame had absorbed most of the blast. Wow. So Grace is fine. Edith is so unstable when she gets to the hospital that they can't risk transporting her to the operating room, so they just worked on her in the
Who's
ER.
The pregnant one?
Charmaine.
Okay.
Charmaine is fine.
Gotcha.
Charmaine is fine. A lot of the medical attention went to her, and she kind of felt guilty about that after.
She was pregnant.
Mm-hmm. So she's so unstable. Stop it. So Edith is so unstable, like we said, they can't transport her, so they have to work on her right in the ER. And separated by just a bed sheet, her friend Andy Wallach laid in the next bed over from Edith, likely downplaying the severity of his injuries because his friend was on the table dying. He had an IV in his arm as he heard the surgeons shout instructions to his nurses as they tried to save Edith's life. Edith needed so much blood that the hospital ran out of their blood reserves. So they asked nurses and cops at the hospital to donate. Then they had to call and wake up people on donors lists so people could go pick them up in the middle of the night and bring them to the hospital.
Wow. Imagine if they had to go back to the policeman's ball to pick up even more, pick up the guests who were blood donors.
Yeah, they'd have to give them a lot of water so they could donate. So
she gets drunk when she gets their blood. She gets hammered.
In all seriousness, though.
Yeah, sorry.
Around 3 a.m., the surgeon came out to the waiting room covered in blood and told Mrs. Tchaikowski that Kenneth was fine, but Edith was in bad shape, but was stable for now.
Okay.
He said that the family should go home to rest, and he would call them if he needed to. But unfortunately, a few hours later, the Tchaikowskis were called back to the hospital because Edith had taken a turn for the worst, and she didn't make it.
Oh, no.
At 5 a.m. on June 26, 1966, 20-year-old Edith Tchaikowski was pronounced dead. Around 1 a.m. on Saturday night, Sunday morning, Stanley Hasketh came home to 1912 Ford Boulevard. He had heard about a shooting in East Windsor but didn't think it was on his block. When he came home and saw all the cops in the crowd near his house, it made him really nervous. So what made Uncle Stanley even more nervous was that when he walked into his home and saw all the shotgun bullets laying on his kitchen table. So he immediately goes and finds Matthew, who is asleep in bed. He shakes him awake and asks him where his shotgun is. Macon tries to ignore him, but Stanley asks him...
Did you order pizza again?
That's right. Did you use my credit card?
I want wings!
Yeah. So Stanley asks him about all the cops on the streets. Like, did you do this? Did you do this? And after, evading, Matt goes, yeah, it was probably me who shot those people. And then and then he just passes out.
What the fuck? 10 more minutes, Dad. That's right, he fucking shot those people. God.
So this sends Uncle Stanley into a panic, and he doesn't know what to do. Should I go outside and tell the police?
Did he think he was joking, maybe?
Should he go outside and tell the police, but has Matthew hidden the gun? Will he kill us all? Will he kill my kids? So Uncle Stanley doesn't know. He decides not to take a chance, and he stays up all night drinking coffee, trying not to make any noises till about 6 a.m. when he would normally get up.
People love not calling the police on this block. It's their favorite thing to not do.
That's right.
Just call the police.
So around 6 a.m., Stanley left his house and went to a nearby restaurant and used their phone to call the police. So Stanley spoke with Chief Willett of the WPD, and then Stanley went downtown to make a plan with the cops to go pick up Mathew later that afternoon at his grandma's house on York Street around 3 p.m. But Uncle Stanley has to play it cool all day until they go find him at his grandma's, and like Stanley's scared, but eventually they go to his grandma's in West Windsor that afternoon. So to bring down Matt, they call in Detective Jim Ewer. So this guy is a bear of a cop, like a 6'4", 6'5", 250 pounds, with a booming voice. And Jim Ewer is actually the guy who would later arrest Clarence Talbot after he killed Charlie Brooks. So if you go back to episode 3, Jim Ewer was so scary that he made Clarence Talbot drop his shotgun and lay face down on the pavement just at the sight of him. Yeah. So that's how scary this guy is. So anyway, Jim Ewer knocks on the door at 2136 York Street, and Uncle Stanley answers it as planned. And Ewer walks in and sees Mathew sitting on a chair, shirtless and drinking a beer. Detective Ewer tells him he is under arrest when all of a sudden the back door bursts open and a bunch of cops swarm into the house, right? Okay. So it seems that there was a leak in this secret operation to arrest a murderer attracted a certain group of over-anxious cops. Oh. So Ewer said it was pretty funny at the time, like it was a farce, because everyone wanted to get in on this. They thought it was more of a tactical thing, and it was really just like a quiet kind of takedown. So Jim Ewer arrests Mathew Lamb and brought him downtown to be charged with capital murder. And then the circus begins, dude. So Matt sees a judge on the morning of June 27th, 1966, and he's put under observation. So allegedly, when he was being transported from the courthouse, he tried to escape, and when he was restrained again, he begged the cops to shoot him.
Classic.
So they bring in a private psychiatrist named Dr. Walter Jaworski to examine Matt, but he only interviews him for like an hour. He asks him about his parents, but Matt says, I don't know. Like, where are they? I don't remember. All the while, he paces around the room, speaking incoherently, just rambling on. When Jaworski asks him about the night of the shooting, Lamb says he has no memory of the shooting. He only remembers going home in a cab and then being woken up by his uncle. And then Jaworski tells him that he killed Edith Tchaikowski, and Mathew laughs and says, poor broad.
Wow.
Fucking guy. So after this interview, Jaworski testified that afternoon in front of a judge that Lamb clearly suffered from a disease of the mind and was not fit to stand trial. So the judge remanded Lamb to spend 30 days under evaluation at St. Thomas, Ontario Psychiatric Hospital for more thorough examination. So Matt is off to St. Thomas.
Mad Matt.
So a few days after the shooting, on June 29th, 1966, Edith Tchaikowski was buried at St. Alphonsus Cemetery, which is one of Windsor's oldest Catholic burial grounds. At age 20, she was buried in the children's section, a reminder that a life snuffed out before it truly ever began. Very sad. What's even more sad is that 17 days after the shooting incident, Andy Wallach died unexpectedly at Met Hospital. So the stud athlete, he died 17 days after the shooting. His friends Don Melissa and Vincent Franco had attempted to visit him a few days prior, but only got to the hallway where they saw him reading engineering books and doing his homework before a nurse yelled at them to go back, whatever. They weren't supposed to be there. So apparently, at age 21, Andy Wallach passes away. So maybe if he had gotten more immediate medical attention, this wouldn't have happened.
Wow.
Right?
Maybe like an infection or something? Or...
So he had an undetected abscess behind his liver, which got infected, and that's how he died. Yeah. So apparently, if technology is a lot different nowadays, but apparently it wasn't thorough enough.
Or count as another murder then?
So Mr. and Mrs. Wallach buried their only child, their son Andy, at Heavenly Rest Catholic Cemetery in Windsor. The University of Windsor honored the memory of Andy Wallach by putting his picture and biography in the 1966-67 yearbook. So he died and the University of Windsor honored him. So it was nice. Man. So Andy's death was reported on July 12th, 1966. Do you know what other famous murder happened 2 days later on July 14th?
What year?
1966.
14th, 19... Bobby Kennedy?
No. Richard Speck murdered 8 nurses in Chicago 2 days after Andy Wallach died. And that was called the crime of the century.
The guy who got some tits and turned himself into a woman.
That's true,
You
yeah.
ever seen that prison? He's in prison. He's partying, doing coke and drinking, and other inmates are like feeling his boobs, like getting off on it. It's the most disturbing video.
Yeah, Richard Speck was a mass murderer who later, when in his life in prison, he got hormones smuggled into prison so he could grow breasts so that he would be more protected and be able to offer them favors and stuff. Yeah. Weird. Anyway, so meanwhile...
He was like this guy, though. Just a crazy spree killer fuck.
Meanwhile, Mathew Lamb was at the St. Thomas, Ontario Psychiatric Hospital, now under the care of Dr. James Dolan, but he was unaware now that he was responsible for the death of 2 people and the maiming of 2 others. So while being interviewed by Dr. Dolan, he does the opposite of what he tells Jaworski and gave Dolan a detailed account of what happened. He remembers everything. But this time he adds in the detail that when he woke up, his intent was to shoot himself. But, quote, the next thing I knew, I was on the street and it felt like I was watching another person commit the crimes. So he claimed to be in a dissociative state. So he also lies to Dolan when he says that he threw away the gun over a fence into the field, horrified that he was even holding it. But we know that's not true, right? So Dolan said that when Lamb left Ann Heaton's house, he was coming out of an acute psychotic episode and returning to sanity. So he was divorced from reality when he gunned down his 4 victims and suffered from a disease of the mind. So therefore, Dolan, like Jaworski, concluded that Lamb was incapable of appreciating the consequences of his actions. So he had told his story to 2 different medical professionals, 2 different people, 2 different stories, but got the same result. They both thought he was not responsible because he was insane.
Oh, fuck.
So after 30 days of observation, Dr. Dolan gave the court his psych eval of Mathew Lamb, and the court ordered a 3rd assessment, this time at the Oak Ridge facility for the criminally insane in Penetanguishene, Ontario.
Oh, Penetanguishene.
Yep.
My uncle lives there.
In the bank.
We talked about
in
that.
the bank,
remember?
Yes.
Yeah.
On top of the bank.
Yeah. Not anymore.
Not in the bank. He used to sleep in the vault. So something
That'd
good.
Be sick.
That would be cool. That's right.
That'd be creepy. Though,
That'd be
if
cool
you're
as
with a
hell.
girl and you just shut her in a bank.
Game over.
That would be awkward.
No, that's not good. No, don't do that, please. Fuck. That's scary. Okay. But something good must have happened to Mathew while he was at Oak Ridge because
I'm happy. Good.
For
I'm glad.
Him. Because
I'm really happy.
So something good must have happened there because on August 24th, 1966, Lamb was returned back to Windsor with a report from the staff at Oak Ridge saying he was psychologically fit to stand trial and help in his defense.
Nice. I hope he got a nice thick broom handle for that one. A very girthy brooms at those hospitals, I tell you. They gave him that night.
Mathew was placed in Windsor Jail on Brock Street, awaiting trial for capital murder. Step 1, check. You've visited Windsor Jail on Brock Street before?
Yeah.
Yeah. You used to go there on your lunch break from when we were on the kitchen.
Yeah.
Tell me that story.
Well, if you have someone who's there,
yeah,
you visit them.
Absolutely. You do what you gotta do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's a museum. It's a museum now, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it's Mackenzie Hall. Yeah,
yeah,
I got married in the courtyard, remember?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So...
We're not going to talk about jail.
It's okay. We're not going to talk about jail. I've never been to jail. So, step 1, check, right? He was placed in Windsor Jail on Brock Street. He's awaiting trial for capital murder. He's in there, right? Step 2 is actually getting him to trial, right? But they need to know what kind of killer Mathew Lamb is first. So,
piece of shit killer.
Yeah, that's what I would call him.
P-O-S-K. PhD, motherfucker.
So at the time, naming systems for murderers were very new, so they didn't know what to call Mathew. Was he a psychopath?
Piece of us, shitty of us, killerus.
These murders were part of a wave of mass murders without motive back in the 60s, which are now defined as spree killers, serial killers, or rampage killers. So nowadays we call Mathew Lamb a spree killer, defined as killing 2 or more people at more than one location without cooling off. They seemingly pick their victims at random and don't care about the consequences of their crimes, except that they may be killed by police, commit suicide, or just surrender when they're done. So just, yeah, you have a God complex, basically. So a lot of you may be wondering, if Mathew is this mentally unstable, why was he paroled 10 months early instead of being put back into Kingston Penn's hospital? And why was he let back out into the community, even though a report said he was very likely to recommit crimes upon his release into the community?
So do it again.
Let's introduce the term watching the devil dance, which is the name of the book by Woltoffen that I read, among many other things, for this case. So the term devil dance is a term used by police when a psychopath lies to his listener just to see if he can get away with it. So they use a self-confident swagger while making sweeping, inconsistent statements, confusing the listener and making it difficult to assess them. So the psychopath's goal is to portray themselves as incapable of appreciating the nature of their crimes or its consequences in an attempt to minimize their punishment. So otherwise, it wasn't me. I didn't do it.
Yeah.
So
I can't dance.
That's right. I don't like dancing. So this describes Matthew's behavior under the care. I said my fellas don't dance. We just pull up our pants and do the rock away.
Do the devil dance.
Lean back. Do the devil dance. Lean back. So this describes Matt's behavior under the care of Dr. George Scott at Kingston Penn, Dr. Jaworski in Windsor, and Dr. Scott in St. Thomas, and all three of these men would get on the stand during his trial and tell them about their experiences with Mathew Lamb. So let's get to the trial.
Dr. Scott, I'd highly recommend his psychological assessments.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
I'm just kidding.
No. So let's get to the trial. So Matthew's lawyer is named Saul Nosenchuk, and he's a good lawyer.
Really?
Saul Nosenchuk. A good lawyer who later became a judge. He's a good guy. He's a good guy. I know him. Saul, no good guy. So Saul Nosenchuk, he became a judge later on, and he died in 2017. So rest in peace, Saul. Okay. I love Saul. He's a good character, but he's a good lawyer.
Saul.
Better call Saul, exactly. It seemed like Saul cared about Matthew's life because the punishment for capital murder in Canada in 1966 was death by hanging. So
Really?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Canada had the death penalty.
Hang 'em high.
That's right. He killed 2 people and maimed 2 others. So this case was for Matt's life.
Wow.
So, and Saul Nosenchuk knew pretty quickly that Matt was up Schitt's Creek because during his evaluations at St. Thomas and Oak Ridge, he told his psychiatrist a lot of details about the murder, and he did not show any remorse.
Noose and Chuck.
Saul Nosenchuk.
Chucking that noose possibility.
That's right.
Out of the courtroom.
So if Saul doesn't pursue an insanity defense, Matthew doesn't stand a chance of winning. So if he gives an insanity defense, even if he wins and Matt is acquitted, he can still be put into a mental health hospital for the rest of his life. So it's up to Matt. What do you want to do? So Matt takes a few days to choose, but ultimately decides an insanity defense is the best thing to do. So he signs a consent note saying that Saul's idea of pleading not guilty by reason of insanity is the best move. So for Mathew Lamb, convincing the court of his insanity would be a matter of life and death. And away we go to the trial. So first things first, Saul worked his ass off so Mathew Lamb didn't die of capital punishment. So for Lamb to win an acquittal, his lawyer would need to convince a jury that Lamb's mental illness prevented him from appreciating the consequences of his crimes. So to do that, the testimony of his experts had to be more persuasive than the prosecution's. Pretty simple, yet very not. So Saul interviewed everyone in Matt's life and got 6 psychiatrists to agree to testify in Lamb's defense. So 3 of the 5 doctors who evaluated Matt at Oak Ridge testified saying Lamb was insane. Meanwhile, the other 2 doctors from Oak Ridge testified for the prosecution saying he knew exactly what he was doing. So if Saul failed, the punishment for Lamb would be death by hanging. So this was a risky strategy, but Saul had really no other choice, and he took the chance.
I guess they could argue like he let him babysit his kids, like, and if he was reasonably,
absolutely.
Sound
if you give the right argument, man, like it's a tough case, so you have to work your ass off on it. So the trial is set for late December 1967. Mathew has been in jail all summer and fall with no incidents, but then 3 weeks before his trial, he goes berserk in Windsor jail on Brock Street. He set fire to his blanket and his mattress. He busted up the windows, almost 100 of them, and ripped out the plumbing in his cell, which caused a flood in the jail. So, like, Windsor jail on Brock Street's pretty old. So, like, I'm sure even back in the 60s, you can mess things up. So his rampage lasted for 3 hours and left such an impression on the governor of the jail that he agreed to testify in Matt's defense, saying that he was insane.
Wow.
So the Crown's prosecutor's name is Eugene Duchesne, and he is up against Saul and his client.
Fucked, man.
Yep.
That he could trash it and still get that to his favor, like get him to say he's insane. Like, that's such bullshit.
Mm-hmm. And they were saying like before a few days before the trial, he called two of the witnesses, like two of his psychiatrists, saying like, "Oh, I remembered more about the murders. You got to come talk to me." Like, and
he ordered pizza and didn't get creamy garlic. Like, this guy's crazy, I'm telling you.
No,
He's nuts.
He only got one instead of four like you. That's the problem.
He's nuts.
He's not. He only got one.
Send him away and throw away the key.
Yeah. When Willie orders pizza, it's like, Willie, stop hitting the add button on the garlic sauce.
I order creamy garlic, and sometimes I get a pizza. That's what happens.
Like, your creamy garlic is so good, though. So I get it. So it's Eugene Duchesne, the Crown Prosecutor, against Saul, right, and Mathew Lamb. So the judge for this case was Justice Alexander Stark, and he had just been appointed as a judge less than a year earlier, and this judge had never presided over a criminal trial or given any judgment prior to this. So pretty interesting. So on January 16th, 1967, the capital murder trial of Crown v. Mathew Charles Lamb began. When it's time to plea, Mathew, who is now 19, says in a clear voice, "Not guilty." And then his lawyers follow up by informing the court that they will be invoking the insanity defense under Section 16.2 of the Canadian Criminal Code.
The old 16.2.
The old 16.2. So the Crown Prosecutor, Eugene, and Lamb's defense lawyer, Saul, do their opening arguments and lay out their respective cases. The prosecutor paints Matt as a cold-blooded killer with full appreciation of the consequences of his crimes. But one thing he got wrong was when he said Matt discarded his weapon over a fence. And we will discuss that later.
Shoved it up his ass. That's what he did.
So Meanwhile, the defense claimed that Lamb suffered from a mental illness which did not allow the defendant to fully appreciate the consequences of his actions, and his subsequent fragile personality had triggered a psychotic breakdown, leaving him temporarily insane during the shootings. So when the prosecution introduced eyewitnesses, everyone who spoke to or saw Mathew Lamb on that night testified and said he had a blank look on his face, spoke harshly, and had no emotion in his voice. Even the cab driver said he was very polite when he picked him up at Paulette and Tecumseh and was not interested in the crime scene just 4 houses away from his when he was dropped off. Saul was able to volley these accounts by asking them if Matt's actions could be interpreted as a disturbed young man appearing distant and unaware of his surroundings, and all of the witnesses agreed with Saul that that could be the case.
He was polite to a cab driver. This guy's crazy, I tell you. He's nuts.
He didn't assault his cab driver? Imagine that. Easy Patrick Kane.
He didn't spit on a cab driver?
Yeah. So
throw him away.
Toss him away.
He's horrible.
All I wanted was some courage. So in the end, this case hinged all on the strength of the psychiatric testimony of the medical professionals on both sides of the aisle. And on the prosecution side, there were not a large number of people who considered Lamb guilty. There were only the 2 mental health professionals from Oak Ridge and the evidence gathered by police. Oh, that's it? We've only got all the evidence.
You know, man, I wish this happened in a John Wayne movie. Their sense of justice was way better. They went out of this fucking mental health shit and psychiatrists and insane. Mm-hmm. They fucking just string them right up like the week of.
Mm-hmm. In this case, it would show that quantity was much more than quality. So in contrast to the defense's side, where they had 6 mental health professionals and a member of the prison administration who all believed that Mathew suffered from a mental illness and said that he could not have known what he was doing at that time. So in closing arguments, Saul Nozenchuk told the jury that even if the jury acquitted Mathew Lamb, he wouldn't be free, but would rather be in strict custody in a secure hospital for the criminally insane, possibly for life. So Mathew Lamb's actions clearly showed he had suffered a psychotic episode and was insane at the time of the murders. Then, Crown Prosecutor Eugene Duchesne then gave his closing arguments and told the jury that this was a calculated and cold-blooded murder committed by someone who was just released from a maximum security prison less than 3 weeks before his heinous act. And you know what? They're both right. Yeah. So the prosecutor Duchesne asked the jury, why should this type of killer be exempted from criminal responsibility? Would not a not guilty verdict open the floodgates for sociopaths and psychopaths? When he's right too. And that's some powerful stuff. So he is saying that this case would set precedent in Canadian law.
That's some good shit, man.
Right? So it's a lot to consider. So after Justice Stark took 90 minutes to describe the charges to the jury, which were all 12 males, by the way, they all went off to deliberate the fate of Mathew Charles Lamb.
How did they get that? 12 males?
No.
Were women allowed in juries back then?
I'm not sure what the qualifications were, but that seems kind of suspect to me. And you know what? Like, Eugene may have been right, but if the prosecutor had looked at all of the reports, specifically the report by Sergeant Frank Chauvin of the RPD, the man who found the shotgun at Ann Heaton's and who she called and gave his report to. No, I knew you were going to say that. So if Eugene had looked at all the reports, specifically Chauvin's report, his theory that Matt knew exactly what he was doing would have been a lot stronger because he would have been able to show that Matt had not thrown his gun over the fence, but had indeed left everything in Ann Heaton's backyard. So Lamb had left his ammunition lined up next to his rifle, which was positioned behind a hill, and this could have been an attempt to lure the police into a gunfight. And
rifle? His shotgun.
He left his rifle shotgun. Sorry, rifle shotgun. This could have been an attempt to lure the police into a gunfight and a death by cop situation. So he could have argued that.
Done that before.
Exactly, and he's done that twice before. He's just attacked cops twice before, not just once.
But he lured them once.
He lured them. That's right. And to come see Marina. Thank you. So if Duchesne had looked down that avenue, he might have been able to convict Mathew Lamb, but he didn't. So he didn't. And in fairness, Sergeant Chauvin's report was probably got lost among thousands of pages in that file. There were hundreds of cops on that case. Mm-hmm. It's just a numbers game, man. He couldn't read everything. So it's not all Duchesne's. Like, everyone did their job. Sometimes Saul just worked harder. Mm-hmm. So at 4:30 on Friday, January 20th, 1967, the jurors began their deliberations. So how long do you think they deliberated?
I don't know. 4 hours.
3 hours later, the jury came back with their verdict. Not guilty by reason of insanity.
Oh my God.
Saul had saved Matthew's life.
So, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, so Saul had saved Matthew's life, yet Lamb stood stoic as they read the verdict. He was then transferred to his holding cell by Jim Ewer, the guy who arrested him, and waited to be sent to Oak Ridge Facility for the Criminally Insane in Penetanguishene. He won!
Yeah, but how long was he going to Penetanguishene for?
But did he really win? Upon arrival at Oak Ridge, a one-story red brick fortress with large gray iron doors and barred windows, Mathew Lamb began a 10-year journey that started in He won, but did he really win, Willie? Upon arrival at Oak Ridge, a one-story red brick fortress with large gray iron doors and barred windows, Mathew Lamb began a 10-year journey that started in picturesque Georgian Bay, but ended all the way in Africa. Africa? How? Dr. Elliot T. Barker was a reformer and brought new ideas to Oak Ridge when he was hired in 1965. His new ideas were called social therapy units and therapeutic communities.
I hope they fed him to lions. That's what you're getting to.
Barker believed, Dr. Barker believed that psychopathy and schizophrenia were illnesses rooted in a hidden psychosis. Hidden, anyway. So Barker believed that if you could expose this hidden psychosis, you could treat it and eliminate it. So they made the patients take a chemically induced search for this hidden psychosis while learning to take responsibility for their crimes. Like I said, it was the 60s, man. Who knows? These guys were stoned. So these STUs are a very, what would we call, controversial or morally wrong form of re-education for these patients, which included, you ready for this? Groups of 4 to 6 people would sit on a bare floor for 8 hours a day, totally silent, for 14 days. If they failed or refused, they were punished, either verbally, by being placed in a solitary confinement, by being sedated, or by being put into restraints. If you complied, you were upgraded from the H ward to the G ward. So that's a nice start. In the G ward, they had a different method called defense disrupting therapy, which were high-tension therapy sessions deliberately calculated to agitate patients beyond their breaking points until they admitted to being insane. So they would just corner you and sit around you and be like, why won't you just admit that you're, like, criminally insane, man? Just what, like, this is just the start. Like, come on, like, you just gotta... And they would just badger you for days and days and days, and if you didn't break, they would choke you unconscious with a towel.
Damn.
Yep. Also, psychedelic drugs were a big part of the DDTs. Patients were injected with true serum and methadone, a stimulant. But by the time that Mathew Lamb was introduced to the G ward, they were injecting LSD and methamphetamine into patients. So the party was getting started, buddy. So if you were in the F ward, you were put into the Total Encounter Capsule with the TEC, which is a sensory deprivation tank, which was 2 meters by 3 meters with soundproof walls and padded floors, which was all painted green. The ceiling was a one-way mirror, and there was a toilet and a sink. All the patients were allowed to do was eat. All they were allowed to eat was water, tea, soup, or juice, which was often laced with hallucinogens, which was fed to them through a straw by a small hole in the wall. And 2 to 7 patients were held in the capsule at the same time for upwards of 2 weeks, and they were all naked, and they filmed it.
Nice.
So the goal was for the patients to learn how to show empathy. As Dr. Barker summed it up, the goal is to cure you, even if I must first drive you mad. So that's a nice quote. As soon as he arrived in the winter of 1967, Lamb was reportedly very enthusiastic about Barker's experimental programs and developed a close relationship with Dr. Barker and the Oak Ridge director, Dr. Barry Boyd. Both of these guys were the guys who testified against him for the prosecution. They wanted him to be found insane because they had some plans for him. Lamb was quickly elected by his peers to be a patient therapist because he had leadership skills.
Nice.
So he would supervise STU sessions, collect data, and even recommend pharmaceutical prescriptions based on his expert knowledge. He thrived at Oak Ridge. So he was their golden boy. So how? A rumor started going around that after he was elected as a patient therapist, that maybe Mathew was having a sexual relationship with someone at Oak Ridge. But who? We never found out. In 1972, with the government determined to tighten up policy and procedures at Oak Ridge.
That's a weird thing to insinuate with no suspect.
I know. But when I finish the story, you might have an idea. So, in 1972, with the government determined to tighten up policy and procedures at Oak Ridge, Dr. Barker unexpectedly resigned his position because he felt uncomfortable with the conservative winds of change blowing through the Ontario Mental Health Center. He retired to live on his 200-acre farm. So nice. he felt the heat rising up, so he got out. So before Barker retired, he wrote a glowing recommendation on Lamb's behalf, asking the parole board for his outright release. Because of this letter and Barker's reputation, Lamb was released and immediately moved in with Barker and his family on their farm. So Lamb is out. And lives with Barker on his farm in Penetanguishene. So Matt worked as a farmhand. He babysat the children when the doctor and his wife went away for various conferences or speaking tours. The doctor was paying Mathew a living wage, but he was saving up that money so he could buy Israeli war bonds, with his plan being to one day offer his services to the tiny state of Israel as a mercenary. That's right, a killer for hire. So in October 1973, Israel was attacked by Syria and Egypt in retaliation of the Six-Day War. Mathew Lamb boarded a plane in Toronto on his way to the Middle East. He says, I'm going there. That's where the fighting is. I'm going. His goal was to join the Israeli Defense Forces, but he was rejected after he failed the standard psychological exam, and his background showed that he was a spree killer who had just been released from a mental health facility. So Israel at least did a good job of doing a background check. But undeterred, Lamb began a world tour to Australia by traveling through South Africa, when along his journey he heard that the country of Rhodesia was desperate for mercenaries, so Mathew signed up. What is Rhodesia? So
South Africa?
It's a part of South Africa. So Rhodesia was an unrecognized state in South Africa, which began as a British colony, but self-declared independence from the UK in November of 65. So from 65 until 79, Rhodesia was a white minority-ruled government, and like apartheid South Africa, Rhodesia strictly enforced curfews and imposed restrictions on the most basic rights of the native black people. So today, Rhodesia is split and is now the countries of Zambia and Zimbabwe. So basically, white supremacists were trying to take over an African colony, and Mathew Lamb says, I'm all there for it. So in 74, Mathew joins the Rhodesian Light Infantry, and after serving 1 year, he was transferred to the Rhodesian Special Air Services, an elite airborne unit. So Lamb was now a spy. He's a spy in the Rhodesian army, and he's assigned to gather information about nationalist groups who are opposing the Rhodesian government. But he didn't like it, so he wanted to engage in battle, and he sacrificed higher pay and a better job to go down the ladder because he preferred the adrenaline rush of combat. So he's doing like recon missions and things like that, but he wants to be on the front lines. So this is Matt's quote about killing. Quote, "Really, I don't feel any guilt about the people I kill. I don't know them. They mean nothing to me. Oh, end quote. So Lamb flew back to Canada in May 1976 on his first military leave. He visited Barker in Penetanguishene for a few days and tells him about his time in Rhodesia before he goes back to Windsor for the first time since he went to Oak Ridge. So for the first time since 66, he goes back to Windsor. Matt visits his uncle with his military uniform on. He's all proud of himself. After this visit, he apparently goes on a walk down Olette Avenue, and he stops because there's a funeral procession coming from Anderson Funeral Home. It's the Tchaikowski family. So Edith's grandmother had passed away, and they were on their way to the graveyard, and Matt was watching the funeral procession go by, and Richard, Edith's younger brother, was in the lead car, and he noticed a uniformed soldier on the sidewalk, so he does a double take, and then he notices his face, and he goes,
wow,
it's fucking Mathew Lamb.
That's crazy.
Like, not only is he out,
wow,
but he's in Windsor.
Wow.
Like, and he's, like, watching our procession go by. Like, so his mom, Mrs. Tchaikowski, falls to pieces when they find out that Mathew Lamb's out, and she doesn't leave her house for 3 months after this.
Damn.
But the question is, like, was this on purpose? Did he know that they were going to be there? Was this all, like, chance? Who knows? But the family contacted the Windsor Star, and they ran a story on it. So Lamb flew back to Rhodesia and was quickly promoted to Lance Corporal of a squad of 4 troops. On Sunday, November 7th, 1976, Lamb and his team hopped on a helicopter and were dropped into a battle zone in the southeastern border region of Rhodesia to fight off terrorists. Quote-unquote terrorists. It's dusk, so it's shadowy, and it's hard to see, so they're under fire. And so Lamb and another soldier move forward into a better position. He's in a group of 4 people, right? So one of his cover snipers suddenly saw a shadowy figure dart across a riverbed just a few meters from Lamb's position. So he fired 2 rifle shots at the figure, and it fell to the ground. When the gunfire stopped, the trooper ran over to the body, expecting to see a terrorist. But when he rolls him over, it's Mathew Lamb. And he is dead.
Wow.
Both shots hit Lamb and tore open his chest, and before exiting out his back. Although he was killed by friendly fire, Mathew Lamb was officially recorded as killed in action. The death of a Rhodesian soldier was big news for this small country, so what did they do? They gave Mathew Lamb a public hero's funeral in Salisbury, Rhodesia on November 15th, 1976. So that's right. They draped his casket with a Rhodesian flag with flowers, which was carried by a horse-drawn carriage to a cemetery. An honor guard fired off 3 rounds, and a band played When the Saints Go Marching In while he was cremated. Oh, when the Saints go marching in. Oh, just no soul. So the country's largest newspaper, the Rhodesia Herald, looked into Mathew's background, found out that he was a spree killer in 1966, and ran a headline shortly after his funeral saying, "This man was no hero," with a big article about his crimes. They detailed his criminal past in Canada, but the Rhodesian government would have none of that. The first and last Prime Minister of Rhodesia, a piece of shit named Ian Smith, personally called the newspaper demanding that they retract the story because, quote, "We are under attack from the black nationalists and we need white heroes more than ever," end quote.
Makes sense.
So 3 days after Lamb's funeral, the newspaper retracted the story, but that doesn't mean the story didn't get back home to Windsor. Last part. So a radio show in Windsor contacted Detective Jim Ewer for a story about Lamb, about how he was a war hero in Rhodesia, whatever. So Ewer tells him that he had no idea that Lamb was even out of the Oak Ridge facility for the criminally insane, let alone fighting as a mercenary in Africa and being a war hero. So that kind of story went down the poo-poo. But other Canadian newspapers wrote about Lamb's story as a war hero and as a mass murderer. Newsweek did a story about him in late 76. When they interviewed the Tchaikowski family, they said that they were relieved that Lamb was dead, and they were even more relieved that he wasn't treated like a hero back in Windsor. So Mathew Charles Lamb's ashes were flown back to Windsor, and his uncle allegedly buried them next to his grandmother's grave. By the way, in 1980, Rhodesia was renamed Zimbabwe when it became a black majority ruled state. So Ian Smith and his racist followers lost. Suck it. This media attention for Lamb also had some political impact in Canada in the House of Commons because a federal MP demanded an answer from the sitting Prime Minister to explain how a convicted spree killer who was criminally insane, how could he first obtain a Canadian passport and then renew it while still in custody at Oak Ridge? That's a good question. Who the hell was in charge during that time? Hey, whatever happened to that Barker guy? A study of Barker's STU and DTT program showed that 59% of participants recommitted crimes after release, over 80% among psychopaths. Instead of learning empathy, these patients only learn to appear more empathetic in order to better manipulate and control others. So these psychopaths, psychopaths who were untreated on average were actually committed less crimes than those enrolled in Barker's program. So you were less likely to be an asshole if you didn't go into his program. So in 2010, over 20 former patients of Dr. Barker and his successor sued the doctors and the Ontario government. In 2017, a Justice Paul Perrell of the Ontario Supreme Court ruled that the patients were subjected to mental and physical torture while also suffering gross violations of their human rights. The case was sent back down to the civil court, but no one knows what happened. It may have been settled behind closed doors, but I wasn't able to find out. So that's the story of Mathew Charles Lamb and how his lawyer Saul Nosenchuk was able to get him acquitted by reason of his sanity. And with the help of Dr. Elliot T. Barker, Mathew slipped through the mental health system and made a mockery of it while he did it. Rest in peace, Edith Tchaikowski and Andy Wallach. Grace Dunlop lost a kidney, as no one really ever heard from her since. And the poor Tchaikowski family. The sources this week were Dancing with the Devil by Will Toffin and the internet, because this is a long fucking case, long time ago. So that's it. That's the end, buddy. Man. That's a good one.
Wow.
And that's Wild, Wicked, and Weird if I ever found one.
It's the Canadian justice system for you.
Yep. So I know it was long. I know it's tough to get through that, but if I had left out any of those details, I would have felt guilty. So hope you guys enjoyed.
Yeah. That's nuts.
What are your thoughts?
It's crazy, man. Like, you know he's going to get out early.
Yeah. After about 60%, they say around here. So
yeah, I'm not surprised. Rhodesia, South Africa, they don't have a good track record.
Exactly. Yeah, they were looking for anybody, and he fit the bill, and unfortunately, they made him a hero when he didn't really deserve to be. So that's the story of Mathew Charles Lamb, and unfortunately, the victims in his story didn't really get talked about before this book, and that's why I wanted to make sure I finished the book and did a thorough job, because if you go on Wikipedia or other things like that, they don't talk about the victims.
Watching the Devil Dance?
Yep.
And who's the author?
Will Toffin.
What? It just came out, right?
Yep.
Recently?
Yeah,
nice.
You bought me this for Christmas, so
I did.
And it took me 6 months to finish it, but I didn't want to do a bad job early on. Like when we were first doing the show, like we were thinking about doing cases and stuff, and when I finally looked into this, I was like, okay, I'm not good enough at doing this yet to kind of tackle this. And it would have been disrespectful to kind of just do a Wikipedia thing and then not talk about the victims.
This is a big case, yeah.
Absolutely. So I understand it's a long case. It's probably our longest ever, but we appreciate you listening through, and we hope you enjoyed it. And if you did enjoy it, please leave us a 5-star review on Apple. It's Wild, Wicked, and Weird Podcast. Give us a review. Follow us on Facebook. Give us a like on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at WildWickedW. Send us an email at wildwickedandweird@gmail.com. You can now find us on YouTube, Wild, Wicked, and Weird on YouTube. If you want to listen to our shows on there, we're going to start uploading them now.
Everyone likes YouTube.
Everyone loves YouTube.
A monkey can use it.
Everyone loves a sling key. Everyone needs a sling key. Sling key. Sling key. Go, Slinky, go! Is that all you got?
That's all I got, man.
All right. From all of us here at the Wild, Wicked, and Weird Studios, this is Willie and Brett saying thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Until next time, stay wild, wicked, and weird. Ciao.